I'm trying to keep my cat under control as well. This is pretty crazy. But yeah, I guess we're here to talk about the Fountain War project, huh?
Yeah, that and just, lore and what have you. I've been meaning to ask you something. We didn't get that much of a chance to talk uh, in Iceland, although I did. Not in Iceland. I'm sorry, in Vegas. I get those two confused. Iceland, Vegas are the same. We didn't get that much of a chance to talk in Vegas, but I did enjoy the conversation we had. Uh, but I've been meaning to talk to you about a concept that's kind of in my head. Um, I like to think of lore as being the things that you guys wrote, the backstory for the game, the history for the game, the ongoing pieces that you guys have written. I
Yeah.
like to think of history as stories that were created by the players. Does
Mhm.
that sound about right to you?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think it's like that. I think there's definitely a distinction, and we do try to keep sort of a very, very clear definition between what's sort of like prime fiction that we've written and what's player history. And I kind of think as well it's super important for us to differentiate between the two because I feel like although I contribute a lot to the backstory of Eve and the prime fiction of Eve, I really don't feel CCP should be the ones who are writing the player backstory. I think it should be done by the players. So because it's kind of if CCP were, for instance, to write the Fountain War, it would be tainted by our views rather than player views, and it would be biased towards how we thought the Fountain War went and who we thought won or who was victorious. So yeah, I think it's really important. For instance, like the book, the Fountain War Project, and the book about the Great Northern War that Andy Grones put together. It's super important that definitely the backstory is written by us, and the player history is written by the players themselves.
I like that. In fact, Torfy said something at Vegas that I absolutely love. The idea that you guys have created this huge, complex, rich universe, but that so much of what goes on there is completely out of your hands. I mean, obviously that's the nature of sandbox games to begin with, but the Eve community has done just amazing things with that. Uh, can I ask you a dumb question?
Sure.
Oh, well, you're going to get a lot of them today since I've got you as a captive audience. How much of this is you?
Uh, a little bit. So there was a team of five writers. There was CCP Torrey France. We also had Hjalti Danielson, Gauti Fredriksson. These are the two guys who wrote most of Eve's initial backstory, the really dark stuff from the early days of Eve. Then there was John Castronis, Nick Bardsley, and myself who all contributed. And I ended up writing a lot more than I anticipated for
Hmm.
Eve Source. It just sort of kind of took my life over for 3 or 4 months, and it ended up being this huge thing. So yeah, there's a lot of my crazy ramblings in that book. Thankfully, I was very privileged to be involved with the project, especially with a publisher like Dark Horse. It was fantastic to be a part of.
I think I told you before. Uh, there's, I think, a natural tendency for people to assume that I jumped immediately at the opportunity to get involved in this project, and the
Yeah.
answer is, and realistically, I was interested,
Hmm.
uh, but it wasn't until I did two things that I was seriously hardcore hooked. One of them was actually to log on myself and play a little bit of the game badly. I'm very good at playing Eve badly. If you need instructions on how to get your ass kicked in PvP, or I'm your guy. But the other one was to pick up this book. Somebody recommended the Eve source book to me,
Yeah.
and partly the stories, partly the art, but just the idea that it was this tremendously rich universe. That was amazing. Um, oh, hang on. I wanted to touch on some stuff that I've seen go by in the thread. First of all,
Sure.
people have been saying cool things about your red and black furniture. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Your furniture is way cooler than mine. I also wish I had some cats to play with while we're here. I don't. I don't have the ability to do that. I could pretend that I have a cat, but I'm not a very good actor. So if you want to loan me one of yours or something while we could do this, that would
I'm
be
I'm sure I could FedEx one over. I've got three of them in there. They're all little pains in their own way.
yes, absolutely. Um, oh, yep. Somebody was asking about the Eve source book. If you haven't seen this, check it out. This is cool stuff. It's absolutely cool stuff. there's a lot, Paul. There's a lot. Would you rather I call you Paul or Falcon while we're on
I'm
this thing?
fine either way. Paul is good.
Okay. There's a lot of stuff going on in Twitter right now about
Hmm.
how much lore should end up in the story. Should it
Yeah.
be a lot of it? Should it be none of it? Should it be my theory and my sense is this. I have a Navy background. I
Hmm.
was in the Navy 23 years, and the U.S. Navy's got. I say Navy, obviously, many countries have their own Navy. Sorry, U.S. Navy. I was in the U.S. Navy for 23 years. Um, it's got a shitload of history. I mean, obviously there are countries that have been around longer, but I mean, I just learned things like, a few years ago, I just learned that rudder, which a term that we use every day, comes from rode oar, steering oar, that goes all the way back to the Viking steering oars on the longboats.
Yeah.
So we've got this huge backstory, this huge uh, uh, lore and tradition and customs and things like that. Um, my challenge when I'm writing a Navy thriller is to figure out how much of that to put in to give readers the impression that they're actually there surrounded by people in the Navy community and how much not. So I'm constantly, even when I'm writing a military thriller, looking for a balance between story and lore.
Yeah.
So I think here I am doing that again. Um, the difference is when I'm writing military pieces, if I wanted to find out a particular thing about lore, I might have to go to 40 books to find it. The good
Yeah.
news is here, I could just poke you and bug the hell out of you. And if you don't know the answer, you know somebody who does. So I am going to be bugging the hell out of you. So I hope you're ready for that.
It's one thing that I absolutely, it's one thing that I absolutely love. I mean, my history goes right back to 2003 with writing play fiction, and I mean, I ended up in the 10 years that I was playing Eve. Before I came to CCP, I wrote something in the region of 1,600 pages of fiction, over 100 episodes of player fiction, um, and then came to CCP, and immediately they managed to requisition me for the storyline team when I got here, so which I was very, very privileged and proud to be a part of. And then, I immediately got involved with Eve Source, and then the Art of New Eden as well. So yeah, I think I've got a decent handle on the backstory of Eve. Definitely, it's been with me for a good 13 years now. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the original question, I think with any military book, there's always going to be sort of kind of an index and a lexicon of, like, abbreviations, commonly used terms, kind of things that, a civilian who hasn't been exposed to kind of military jargon sort of thing is always going to be having a reference to. Um, so yeah, I think having a nice balance of lore and backstory, as well as all the player stuff in there, is really good. I mean, it's for people who are sort of taking part in the Eve universe for the first time, reading a book. Then they need to know, for instance, what a Tengu is, what a Drake is, how that relates to what an Apocalypse is or what an Avatar is. Sort of, they need to have an idea of how different ship classes being on the field would change the sort of the swing of a battle, the outcome of a battle, what kind of weapon systems are in use, that kind of thing. So I definitely think there's going to be a pretty big element of having to be descriptive and sort of having a kind of to give a little bit of information on exactly what's going on at the same time, without having to, kind of flick to the back and look at, all right, okay, this abbreviation means this. So it's definitely going to be a challenge, I think, to get the familiarity with the setting down initially, sort of in the first chapter or two. So yeah, I'm really, really interested to see how that process goes.
I, I think I'm 100% in agreement with that. I think the good news is, to some degree, readers and viewers take it for granted that they don't have to understand everything.
This is
If
true.
you're watching an episode of ER, or you're watching an episode of House, and a doctor comes in and drops 84 medical terms in your lap in rapid succession, you don't feel like, you as the viewer, while you're watching the show, that you have to understand how, I don't know, how T-series lymphocytes actually are going to affect this guy's liver. You don't have to know that. All you need to know is the guy's sick. They're going to do something. Now there's going to be an operation. Here comes the medicine. Oh my God, that didn't work. It's like at some point the drama has to tell itself as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like every time we drop a term or every time we say something that the reader has to pick up on it. But there's kind of a, there's a certain point at which we can trust them to just assume that, hey, that's cool stuff. I also think that means that we can have capsuleers use capsuleer slang without explaining it. And the readers who play the game will know what it means, and the readers who don't will just go, oh, well, it's pilots doing some of that pilot shit.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. And I also think, this, in particular, because of your background as sort of a Navy thriller writer as well, and people who might pick up the book because it's got a spaceship on the cover or whatever, or it's classed as being rooted in science fiction, even though it really isn't fiction in some elements. I think that it's naturally going to attract a certain audience and a certain type of reader. So a lot of the stuff, when you're talking about pre-established terms such as going into warp, you're talking about different types of thrusters, you're talking about warp drives, you're talking about energy weapons and hybrid weapons and missiles, then I think there's going to be an element of understanding that a lot of the people that the book is going to cater to are going to understand regardless of, whether or not they actually know Eve itself. It's more of, they have a familiarity with sci-fi and they can fill in the gaps with sort of their own imagination. So I don't think it's going to have a massive I don't think there's going to be a huge gap to bridge, but I definitely think there's going to need to be a little bit of familiarity, just a few basic things.
Yeah, and I think finding out how much is enough and how much is too much is going to be a huge challenge. And my guess is sometimes I'm going to get it wrong. My guess is sometimes test readers, when they look at it, are going to say, holy shit, that's like drinking from a fire hose, that's too much. And sometimes they're going to say, I didn't get that. He hooked the what into the what. So I think there's going to be some of both of that. I wanted to ask you a question real quick. Out of the fiction that you've written, the player fiction that you've written, what is your favorite thing? What's your favorite story that you wrote?
Wow. So I've written everything from pieces that are purely around character development, like my characters' relationships and friendships and business dealings with other characters, to fleet battles and fleet fights based off what you're doing when you're looking at kill reports and you're looking at how a fleet battle works and a battle report, and then you're kind of translating that into an actual piece of descriptive text from a certain point of view. I really enjoyed doing that over the years. And then I've also gone sort of beyond that as well and put my characters on a station or on an outpost or on a hangar floor somewhere, and they've gotten into a firefight or a fist on fist brawl or something like that. Or it's been a business deal that's gone sideways and everyone's found that they've been shooting at each other. I think one of the most enjoyable things for me is writing about combat, writing about how ships interact with each other, writing about how a frigate being struck by a fast-tracking laser turret reacts to it, the armor peeling back, the explosions, that kind of thing. So the descriptive writing for me that I absolutely love is about combat. And thankfully, a while back, we had a big event in Eve called the Battle of Kildare Prime, and I ended up writing a chronicle for that, just a short story based in Eve called Fallen Skies. And I started out writing this thing, and I was like, yeah, it's going to be maybe 2,000 words, and it'll just be the view of sort of a dust mercenary on the ground, and then it'll be the view from the guys who are up in space above the planet shooting at a Titan. And suddenly this thing, because I enjoy writing combat so much, this thing evolved into this 8 or 9 chapter long crazy sort of viewpoint where I was flicking backwards and forwards from space to the ground, back to space again, back to the ground from a different unit. And then I was talking about one unit that brought a dropship down, and then how the guys who were waiting for that dropship to arrive with reinforcement got screwed by the fact that dropship went down. And it just turned into this huge mess, and it ended up being the longest chronicle that CCP's ever released. And I was and I remember CCP Naughton, Gertie Fredrickson, when he was a CCP, I gave him it to copy edit, and he was like, okay, wow, this is long. And he just like
Mm.
had this total mental break where he was like, shit, I've got to deal with like, I was expecting 3,000 words and suddenly I've got 12,000 to deal with. And he was like, wow, okay, this kind of exploded. And it ended up taking him like 3 days to get through. So yeah, the sort of the visceral and the descriptive side of combat is what I love the most, in terms of writing. It's something that I really, really enjoy putting together.
That's very cool. If you saw me look away from the camera there for a minute, it's because I was writing down Fallen Skies. I will be reading that before the sun goes down in California. So thanks for bringing that to my attention. I see in the feed there, the McLeod was saying if we want to draw non-EVE players into what's going on without confusing them, we have to work on how to develop the what and the why and the when for EVE player battles. I completely agree
Mm.
with that, the McLeod. I don't necessarily know how to go about some of that. I'll tell you that straight up. I'm going to be solving those problems one at a time. Um, uh, I was doing an interview when I was working on one of the sample pieces, and actually, I was talking to Scion and Mark Shetler, and he used the phrase when we were talking about some of the political back and forth that led up to the Fountain War. He used the phrase war of choice. It was a war of choice. Both sides in some ways decided to engage, that they
Yeah.
both kind of had the opportunity to back away. And there was some failed diplomacy, and there was some moon grabbing. There was all kinds of stuff going on, but ultimately that it was a war of choice. I like that idea. I like the idea that ultimately, and that's one of the things we want to do in the book, we want to actually be able to trace, to go back um, Montolio and Buddha Buddha and the various diplomats and everything, and tried to see if we could peel the onion and tell the story of
Yeah.
why some of this happened. Um, and the cool part about it is we're not going to get an answer. We're going to get several answers,
Yeah.
because there's the war as Buddha Buddha saw it. There's the war as Montolio saw it. There's the war as the Mittani saw it. There's the war as the head of Eclipse saw it. There's the war as the average line pilot saw it. And all of those were different wars. So trying to actually get to the bottom of that is going to be challenging as hell, but it's also going to be amazingly entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I was entirely unconnected to this war as an Eve player. I was like a low-sec pirate and a mercenary when all this was happening. And I occasionally just, we'd catch the tail end of one of these fleets and maybe, whack a couple of people who were trailing behind, steal their stuff, and we would move out before anyone could come back and hit us. So it was, for me, it's going to be interesting from my point of view to not just see what came out publicly and not see the battle reports and the fleet fights and the propaganda, but actually see what happened beneath the surface and sort of the thought process that some of these people went through. Do we want to, like you said, a war of choice? Is it worth it? Do we just let our egos take the hit and back down and walk away from this? Or are we going to throw everything we've got at it? And the reasoning behind why everyone chose to jump into this huge brawl, and actually seeing that from different sort of opinions, like different angles, different people's takes on like different aspects of what actually caused the war, I think is going to be super interesting. It'll be really nice to actually see it. And this is the prime reason that, like, there's been a few comments like, why isn't CCP writing this? Like, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we putting books like this together? Because it's not our place to do this. Like, players have created this immense tapestry of history over the last 13 years. There's nothing like it in any other game that you'd think about. Like, there's no other game out there on the market. There's no other experience out there on the market where you can have this sort of impact on so many people's gameplay. And I think I think we would sell it short if CCP were to try and write this. I think it needs to come directly from sort of the minds and the voices of the people who actually lived it. And I don't think it should be tainted by our viewpoint from sort of a surgical look down the middle of what happened, and we shouldn't try and rewrite history. I think it has to be the thoughts, the experiences, and the feelings of the people who were actually, on the ground.
In some ways, I think that, and speaking to that same point, in some ways, I think that coming to this as an outsider gives me both some advantages and some disadvantages. Uh, the advantage is I don't belong to any alliance that had any part in any of these fights. I don't have the back history or the backstory or everything else like that. So I'm in a position where I can write about it from kind of a detached viewpoint. But now I'm also a player, not a good player, but I'm somebody with some skin in the game, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm learning it, and the whole 9 yards. And it's like, so it's like I'm in this kind of interesting position that kind of allows me to wrap my head around some of this. But the other thing is because I don't belong to any organization, any particular organization. I'm discovering, especially now that we're doing these virtual book tours and everything, when I get on Mumble with these guys or on Skype with these guys, I think I'm getting answers to questions I wouldn't get answered otherwise. I think if they fought, I think if I was a more established player, people would be kind of more leery of me. And don't get me wrong, there's still a bunch of people that automatically, they see my name in the same paragraph as the Mittani, and I'm automatically labeled the Antichrist. I'm okay with that because when they actually see the pieces of this start to come out, they're going to realize that that's not what I'm doing. But nevertheless, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is a book that I don't see how CCP could write this book. And I think if CCP sat down and even said, let's go hire somebody, then you'd have to lay out, we want a book that does this, we want a book that does that, we want a book that does this, X, Y, and Z. And instead, you're in a position where I get to talk to these people and go, what needs to be there? What doesn't need to be there? How close, what are your pain points and what are your pressure points? Like, I was really surprised at kind of the pushback on changing the name of CFC to the Imperium. I was in my mind, I couldn't see trying to sell something as a serious piece of science fiction with a major alliance called the Clusterfuck Coalition. So it's like it seemed to me like the obvious thing to do. Well, it turns out that's not what the players want. It turns out the players threw the bullshit flag on that play immediately. Well, the thing is that allows me to be in a position where I can have these dialogues and I can get beat up by people who don't agree with what it is that I'm doing and who take issue without putting CCP in the position where they're having to get involved down on the deck plate in some of these brawls. So I think that gives me an opportunity. It also raises challenges, but it gives me an opportunity. Somebody was saying that we're frozen. No, it looks like we're back. Okay. Actually, I probably look better frozen unless they catch me in in one of those rare things where I actually look halfway anti-photogenic. I don't know if that's a real word. Let's see. Players create. I'm reading from the stream.
I do think the point that just came up there as well that Urandis just made is he said he was a little distraught about that too. If it's to be historically accurate, then it should be the CFC because we didn't change our names till this spring. And yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I also agree with the counterpoint that's sort of like, can you really write a serious, what's classed as a serious piece of science fiction with a name like the Clusterfuck Coalition there? But I think, yeah, for me, I mean, it borders on the side of, for my personal views, I fall on the side of I'd prefer historical accuracy. And there are some ridiculous names of alliances and corporations in EVE. There are some ridiculous character names that are also going to need to be tackled as well, I guess. Because, some people just don't really think about it when they create their character or their corporation and they just plug anything in. And then, 3 years later, you've actually been successful and, suddenly your alliance is led by like Super 2069 or something like that. And it's something that you're like, shit, I really should have thought of a better name. And then, it's one of those things that's always going to be an issue for people. I would definitely be sort of on the side of historical accuracy without a doubt. And I can understand why it ruffled some people's feathers because there's a lot of heritage attached to names in EVE, and people get, well, the EVE community in general gets pretty distraught when any changes are made. That takes anything away from history. So yeah, I mean, as a really, really ingrained EVE player for many years, I can understand where they're coming from in that respect. But I also understand the counter argument too.
in some places, I'm literally not going to have a choice. Some of the characters in the game use names that you can get away with it in the game, but some of them are actually using names that are trademarked,
Yeah,
that are actually
absolutely.
trademarks owned by other companies. And believe me, the very first time I name a character in this game Mickey Mouse, I'm going to end up talking to the Disney trademark lawyers. I don't want to have that conversation. So we're working on some other things, but that it's interesting that of all the things I was expecting pushback on, that wasn't one of them. But now that we know that it's a pain point, we know what to do. Well, at least we've got some ideas on what to do about it. But it's that's the thing is this is going to be an iterative process. The good news is we're not writing the book in a vacuum. The good news is that, and we're also talking about we want to bring the book out in a series of installments. So in a series of as a serial. So the good news is we can come out with with 3 or 4 chapters in a serial installment and have people come back and say, oh, no, that happened differently, or no, or you missed out on this piece over here, or you misdescribed that, or no, that wasn't Bill X, that was Sam Y that did that. And the good news is that gives us the ability to adjust and get smarter as we go along, and it also gives us the ability to bring in information from the community as we go along. So that's that's going to be fun, but again, it's going to be drinking from a fire hose. It's going to be a lot of shit going down.
Yeah, I mean, we had the conversation about this internally at CCP when we started down the path of running the Yamaha Championships, which is the PvP tournament that's going on right now, and we were like, oh, how is it going to look in backstory? If we have like this immensely powerful royal heir in the Yamaha Empire who is like, he has literally trillions of subjects, he owns solar systems and entire regions. And his champion in the Yamaha Championships is like Mickey Mouse or something like that. Then it looks kind of ridiculous in terms of backstory. And the way we generally deal with it is we treat character names as call signs, and then beneath that you have an actual sort of a direct, a more traditional name. And so it was actually pointed out in chat a little while ago that character names tend to be call signs for people. When they're not politically correct or they're trademarked or there's another issue. And there's been a couple of pretty crazy character names that were involved in the Yamaha Championship that we've had to sort of not make mention of or try and kind of smooth over a little bit, because it can be troublesome. It can be something that's something that is really, really a problem to tackle, because players are very creative when they name their characters and their organizations. So yeah, it's something that I think, for the sake of authenticity, sort of giving someone an actual name and sort of slipping their EVE character name in as sort of a call sign between quote brackets between their Christian name and their family name is, I think, from my point of view at least, from writing so much fiction, is perfectly acceptable, because the authenticity is still there and you still recognize the character.
I like that. I like that idea. Someone else also pointed out, and I don't know who came up with this. In fact, I don't know if it might have been you. Someone else actually pointed out that Capsuleers and Eve are the mad gods of the sky. They really are these kind of crazy-ass immortals who don't live by the same rules that other people do. So it kind of makes sense that they're operating in we used to have this thing in the Navy. In order to get a fighter pilot, a real-world fighter pilot, to do what they do, especially on an aircraft carrier, those guys have got to be fucking crazy. I mean, if you think about it, when you're landing an F-18 on the deck of a rolling on the rolling deck of an aircraft carrier, you're trying to hit a sweet spot that's about the size of a parking spot for a car. Well, there's a lot of people who can't pull that off at 5 miles an hour in the Walmart parking lot without hitting the car next to them. Trying to do that at several hundred knots, hit a crosswind in the dark, with rain in your face. It's like you've got to be a little bit crazy to do that. Well, in order to get fighter pilots to that level of kind of readiness, they're constantly indoctrinated on the fact that you are not ordinary. You are extraordinary. You can do things in the sky that nobody ever dreamed of. On Earth, you're immortal, but when you're up there, you're a god. And I think to make that work, to actually do that in real life, those guys have to believe it. And when they get up there, they really are. For that in that environment. So, maybe that's part of it. Maybe we sell that as, hey, these guys are they're the mad gods of the sky, and this is what they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much the same when you. I suppose it's a really interesting parallel. Actually, I've never really thought of it like that. It's a bit of an eye opener that a capsule you detach from their capsule. They get punched in the face. It's gonna hurt.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
gonna be bloody. They're gonna lose teeth. They're gonna end up with a broken nose and a busted cheekbone. But once they jack into this device that allows them to interface with a ship, suddenly they're this they're effectively superhuman. They're lightning fast. They can move 1 million tons of starship with on the whim of a thought. And it is one of those things where I've never actually thought of it like that. That opens up a lot of interesting thoughts about character traits.
it,
It's
it,
very interesting.
I think it does. Somebody was asking, the McLeod again was asking if we could make an uncut version of the book with the names unchanged. Um, I guess that's a possibility. The farther we get into this, and the more that I hear from, I said early on that I wanted to hear from the Eve community, and I've heard a lot on this topic.
Mm.
Um, uh, uh, the farther we get along, the more convinced I am that the best thing to do is leave the call signs or the character names alone when at all possible. If it's Mickey Mouse, it's got to change. Either that or I've got to get permission from somebody. If it's if it's Butt Raper, maybe we have to have a conversation with the character in question and come up with something else. But then again, I mean, maybe it's okay to leave it that way. I don't know. We'll have to think about this. But here's the thing. I'm on the opposite side of a problem that I think that I suspect that you deal with, which is that I'm on the side of I'm trying to capture this history and try to turn it into something and be faithful, simultaneously write something that's readable to and enjoyable to a broader science fiction audience, but also be faithful enough to the game so that the people who play the game feel like I've told their story,
Yeah.
and to do that right. I suspect that you're in that same set of crosshairs every time you come out with a piece of lore, where you're trying to find the balance between what works here, what tells a good story, what makes sense, what gives us underpinning, and what just pisses people off. So, you ever find yourself in a position where people are going, "Why did you do that?"
All the time. I mean, like this happens to us so many times. I mean, this happens all the time where we have aside from sort of the player history and even the amazing stories that players have created through their political dealings in the game. We also have the NPC backstory, and we have a really really solid role playing community within the Eve universe who absolutely love the backstory. They love how it's set, and they love the NPC characters as well, and some of sort of the things that go on in the game in NPC terms. So how the Amar Empire is dealing with things, how the Kaldari State is dealing with things, and my God, we've sort of taken a couple of people out of the running over the course of the last year or so. We removed 2 heads of state from power just to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah.
And my God, when the death of Jamal Saram was announced, the Empress of the Amar Empire, I literally got hate mail. I was like, and I was astonished. I was, wow, like a fictional character, a loved fictional character by some people, fair enough. But I was amazed at just how much of a reaction that this invoked from people. Some people were like, ding dong, the witch is dead. And they were super happy that she was finally gone because they saw her as, they saw her as a false empress. And then on the flip side of the coin, there were people like, I absolutely loved her. She was an amazing character. Why did you have to headshot her? And the backstory team at CCP, we sat down and we were like, wow, this is like, this is big stuff. So yeah, I think it's a case of sometimes, you do have to make controversial decisions, whether it's portraying player backstory or whether it's portraying NPC backstory. But I think you just have to be sort of sensitive to the bonds that people have made over the years, and sensitive to trying to maintain the authenticity of the story that you're trying to tell. And yeah, I think other than that, it's kind of it's very much an open book. You just have to make sure that the respect for the source material is there, definitely.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's this is it's I mean, obviously you work for the company and you've been in this a lot longer than I have, and you've been working this a lot longer than I have. But to some degree, both of us are toying around with other people's universes, and that's It's so it's like that's one of those things where sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not.
Hmm.
Um, I do it's and it's funny. With the military thrillers that I write, for reasons I'm not going to go into, we made a decision early on that for each military thriller that I write, there was going to be a nonfiction thread that involves the history of a major weapon system that plays a serious role. And in the
Hmm.
first book, at Sea of Shadows, it was the torpedo. In the Seventh Angel, it's the intercontinental ballistic missile. In Sword of Shiva, it's the cruise missile. Well, I tell the history of each of these weapon systems in a nonfiction thread that weaves through the books, and they're written as though they're nonfiction research papers by a guy named David M. Hardy for the National Center for Strategic Studies. Well, the funny thing is in how readers react to that. I get people who never mention that. I get people who think it's the worst idea ever, and it interferes with the way with their enjoyment of the book, and they have no idea how an editor was dumb enough to let me do that. And I get people who write to me and beg me to give them the master document that these things were extracted from because that was the best part of the book. So it's like it's funny there where it's like at some point, no matter what we do, some people are going to do this, some people are going to do that, and some people are going to do this. So, but again, we do have to try to stay as true to the story as we can, and to respect what goes on. But it's funny if you touch anything to some degree, it's the third rail.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because we have this same kind of parallel with Eve as well, where we'll be like, we'll write a piece of fiction, and we might go into a little bit of detail explaining something technical, and it'll be like you will have these multiple different ways that people will react. Some people will be like, well, I'm not interested how the capsule works. I don't care about it. I just want to hear the story. I'm not interested in the technical jargon. And then you'll get the second reaction, which is, I don't like the way that you've put that. Like, in my mind, that's not how it should work. That makes no sense to me. And then you get the third class of people, which are my favorite group, because my background before I came to CCP was as an engineer, a robotic engineer, and they're like, give me a document that tells me like intricately in detail exactly how the capsule works. And I mean, I'm talking like I want electrical drawings and hydraulic drawings, and I like, I want to know exactly how many liters of amniotic fluid goes into the capsule. I want to know how the filtration system works and how all the interfacing works and how people climb in and how they fit their jacks and it's like, holy crap, this is such a level of detail that there's some stuff that not even we know, because it's still a gray area that we need to flesh out. So yeah, it's super interesting when you see these sort of different parallels of how people react to stories, and yeah, I totally understand exactly what you're saying.
The good news is that it's fun. The bad news is no matter how I do it, I'm going to piss some people off. That's just the basic nature of the universe.
That's
Um,
exactly the same with the crime fiction that we write as well.
yeah,
It's
oh yeah.
you
That's what I'm saying. It's like you're people are looking at you through that exact same set of crosshairs. So that's why I was saying we're kind of in the same boat when it comes to that. Dirk McGurk asked how close I would say we're going to stay to kind of historical events. My goal is to be as faithful to historical events as I can. Uh, um, I do think it's important to put in some other things, including NPC stuff. For instance, I think I wouldn't want to read a book like this and not see at least a little bit of the story that makes me feel like the crews of the ships are human, that they're
yeah.
real people, that they have lint in their pocket and bills to pay and wives at home or husbands at home or whatever. Um, so it's like at some point I'm going to need to weave that in. We're going to need to go down to the planets a little bit, like you talked about, and talk about business meetings and things that happen off the ships that don't happen in the capsules and things like that.
Yeah.
What I won't be doing, so I will be throwing in some stuff like that. We're probably going to see some stuff from HiSec to see how the war impacts everything from scarcity of materials to economic flow to logistics and transportation. All of
Yep.
that stuff, I think, to kind of bring all that stuff to make the world real and make the world real to, well, you guys have made the world real. For me to bring it to bring that real world to life for readers who've never logged onto the CCP servers before, I'm going to have to kind of do that. So there, I'm going to deviate. I'm going to write things that didn't necessarily happen. All of those things will be in service of the story. What I don't want to do is add battles that didn't exist. I don't want to add diplomatic communications that didn't happen. I don't want to change the outcome of battles. I don't want to make somebody who lost a battle look like they won the battle. I don't want to make so it's like I don't want to play fast and loose with the facts in terms of what happened. What I want to do is anytime I deviate from exactly what is as close to the known facts as we can get them, I want it to be something specifically that brings the universe of New Eden to life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely the right way to go with it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can dramatize a little bit in terms of, if sort of you have to paint a bit of a picture, and if you're talking about a group of leaders of a particular alliance or coalition having a meeting to talk about strategic or tactical moves that they're going to make, then obviously the vast majority of these meetings for EVE players happened on Skype or they happened on Jabber or wherever. Right. But you're talking about in game, in terms of a narrative, you're talking about throwing all these guys into a boardroom around a holographic map, and they're talking about what's going on, where their troops are moving, where their ships are moving, what moves they're going to be taking, and exactly sort of like you're painting a picture within the game itself rather than breaking character a little bit and going to talk about these guys went and had a meeting on Skype, which just completely bursts the fourth wall.
Oh, yeah.
It needs to be and it needs to be set completely within New Eden. So I fully understand that. There's some things that are going to have to be dramatized. But yeah, I think it's really reassuring from my point of view, because I'm one of these people who's also super protective over the backstory of Eve, both player and NPC. So yeah, it's really nice to hear that. Actually, it's really, really good.
I think so too. Somebody was talking about how what I'm not realizing is that these names are actual people that have a foothold in real life. Actually, that's exactly what I am realizing. That's exactly and again, I will apologize. Maybe it's because I've only got a few months with my character, and it's like, so I'm not that wedded to it, and he doesn't have huge exploits, and it wasn't, hey, remember what June Thrail did at the Battle of so-and-so, or remember that time, he headshotted that, whatever. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's why I kind of had a blind spot there to begin with. That's why my goal is to kind of leave that stuff alone. Now that I've heard from the players, and now that I'm kind of starting to understand this, I'm just starting to wrap my head around it. I like to talk a little bit about, and I've talked about this a couple of times, but I think it's useful for me to think this way. I was a sonar technician when I was in the Navy. Mm-hmm. And that's a damn strange thing to do for a living. You hunt submarines for a living. You sit in the dark. You look at things that don't look at symbols on the screen and at salt and pepper waterfall displays that don't make sense to anyone who isn't highly trained and in highly specific and esoteric ways. You do all these things that are just completely bizarre. I would try to explain to friends and family who weren't in the Navy what I did for a living, and I couldn't do it. Not clearly, and it would frustrate me. I'd spend 35 minutes trying to get it across, and they would never really come away with it. Then Tom Clancy wrote this book called The Hunt for Red October. Mm-hmm. And when I read that book, I bought like 10 copies of the paperback, and I ran around handing them to people, and I started saying, here, this is it. This is what I do for a living. I'm not as smart as Jonesy is. I'm not as cool as Jonesy is. I'm not as good at my job as he is, but this is the thing that I do. And I think if we do it right, this book could be the Rosetta Stone for EVE players. EVE players could take this book and hand it to somebody and say, not only this is the game that I love, this is what I do, but I was there. This is me. Yep. That's my friend. That's the CEO of my corp. And it's like that's something I'm wrapping my head around now, that's an important part of this. So yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the Hunt for Red October actually, because my dad's, he's former British military as well, um, and he introduced me to the Hunt for Red October as a movie, the movie with Sean Connery in it. From a very young age, I was always like, we were watching everything from like The Great Escape to, you know, to stuff like the Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, that kind of stuff, and Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford in it, and then coming forward stuff like Saving Private Ryan, Enemy at the Gates, that kind of thing. So I've got like, this is where I take when I've written backstory and fiction for Eve. This is where I've taken a lot of sort of my initial inspiration from. So yeah, it's good to know that's definitely at the forefront. Because yeah, amazing movie, and it was one of the things that it really kind of it opened my eyes to sort of like the kind of suspense side of things that go on when you're in a big fight, whether that be chasing subs or whatever, or whether that be something like a huge fleet battle in Eve. I've been in more than my fair share of big fights in Eve, or fights that are very pivotal in terms of your reputation or the well-being of the organization that you're a part of. And it is one of those things that I've never played another game that sort of would give me the shakes and the jitters and really get the sweat running down my back and like get my pulse pumping like Eve does, because there's a real sense of loss there. And it's like it's really great to be able to find a way to like bottle that and to can that and put that on paper as a set of words. So yeah, it's good to know that that's kind of at the forefront of your mind, without a doubt. But it really is a difficult process. It's a very difficult process to try and sort of bottle this kind of emotion and then to explain it in text form, as well as getting the description right, getting the play of events right as well. It's something that's going to be a real challenge, and I'm really interested to see how you'll tackle it. I'm sure it'll be a learning experience.
I'm sure that it will. I've been called on to teach a few classes on writing, and I'm famous for starting out by walking up to the whiteboard and writing the sentence: "If you can make yourself blank, you can make your reader blank."
Yeah.
If you can make yourself laugh, you can make your reader laugh. If you can make yourself cry, you can make your reader cry. If you can make yourself afraid, you can make your reader afraid.
Yeah.
Well, when I play Eve, when I'm in PvP, I know it's not real. I know that, and I know I've got clones elsewhere. I know that I'm not going to die. I'm not even going to lose anything I can't afford. I'm not flying anything I can't afford to lose. I learned that early on. The old saying, never fly anything you can't afford to lose. So I know that. Nevertheless, when I get out there and I start mixing it up, my adrenaline is up to here. It's like my ears are burning. I'm like, and the back of my neck gets hot. It's like I feel like I'm just freaking throwing down. It triggers all the flight or fight and all the things that come out physiologically that I actually associate with combat. That stuff, yep. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
no worries.
We just got our 2-minute warning. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but we just got our 2-minute warning, so I will shut up shortly. But but the point that I wanted to make is that my goal is to try to get that onto the page. If I can make the reader feel that adrenaline up to here thing, then I've done my job. So
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things that's really it's a huge challenge, and it's a huge challenge as well to get the scale of these kind of fights across. But I think the biggest thing that's going to be the challenge is keeping the authenticity while still trying to get just the massive scale of these fights across in text form. It's going to be something that's very difficult to achieve. I'm super interested to sort of read the first like actual chapters and to see like what your writing style is going to be like, and exactly how you go into details about things, because I'm very much into sort of the technical side of things, so it'll be super interesting to see that. But I think more than anything, the thing that excites me the most is that this is something that's effectively written by the community. This is something that's written, it's not by CCP. We've produced a few books. We've produced 3 novels so far by 2 different authors that detail the NPC backstory of the game. We've got what looks to be a great book coming from Andy Groen that goes into the Great Northern War and sort of the first half of Eve. And then I'm really hoping that, to be honest, I'm just really hoping that the community is going to embrace this project as well, It's had a little bit of a rocky start, but just because of kind of everyone finding their feet and understanding just how big of a project it actually is and how all-encompassing it is for the community. So I think it's I'm really hoping that people will embrace this and it'll get off the ground and it'll be absolutely rock solid, because it's a story that needs to be told, I think. And even if it's a story that's told and some people feel that it's biased, that's fine. Write your own book. Talk about your own side of events. It's like, it's one of those things where, I was talking to CCP Tory fans about this, and it's one of those things that anyone who has a cool idea for this kind of stuff can approach us and talk to us about it. And we're super interested in hearing pitches for stuff like this. So it's, I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And I kind of feel lucky to be one of the guys who's going to get to read some of this stuff first and to look over it. It's
yes,
going to be
absolutely.
It's going to be very interesting. But
well,
I'm pretty pumped for it.
I'm actually very comfortable. It's very comforting to me to know that you're going to be there to poke me with a stick when I get the lore wrong. So so that's going to help me, because there's just so much to know and so much to learn. I think we may be, Laz, I'm sure you're listening. I don't know. It looks like we may be over on time here.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we just got the final thumbs up that we are pretty much done here, and that it's time for us to wrap up. I just want to say to all of you guys, thanks for watching, and to Paul, CCP Falcon, thanks for being here. Thanks for the support, and thanks for letting me pick your brain, because I'm definitely going to be doing it. And I think we're good, and so we're out.
Yep. Have a good one, guys, and thanks very much for watching.